Hey y'all, it's Adrielle. Welcome back to another episode of DEI in 5, the show where we explore topics and news relevant to diversity, equity, and inclusion in roughly 5 minutes, although today's video is probably going to be closer to 10. This week, I've had several conversations with folks, and during those conversations, a question that kept coming up, or some version of it, was how do you approach conversations about DEI in the workplace with someone who isn't interested or doesn't support it or just flat out resists it? More specifically, how do you navigate that if that person is a stakeholder with some serious decision-making power? In episode 14 of DEI in 5, which I'll link up here, I introduced some of the research behind common reasons why people are often resistant to DEI work. And the research really focuses on this idea of what we call psychological threat, which is when people feel like their sense of self-worth, their identity, or even their status is being threatened in some way. And this can happen when someone feels like they're not being treated fairly, when they feel like they're not being heard, or when they feel like they are somehow being left behind in some way. So when people feel threatened, they often react in a defensive way. They might become angry, withdraw from other people, or try to even sabotage your efforts or the work that you're trying to do. So if you are involved in formal DEI work, or if you are just someone who is advocating for DEI work, or even if you are someone who is just simply working towards incorporating more equitable and inclusive practices in your day-to-day work and life or lives, it's important to be aware of the potential of psychological threat and to know how to recognize and address it. So if you see someone who is reacting in a defensive way, it's important to try to understand why they're feeling threatened, right? And you can do this by asking them questions, listening to their concerns, and trying to empathize with their situation. And if you are a person that belongs to a marginalized identity or group, you're probably listening to me and like, WTF, girl, what? And I understand. I hear you. Why should I empathize, especially in situations when a person has significantly more power and privilege than I do? Why should I do that? But I encourage you to take the time to first hear me out today, but really consider this concept of psychological reactants. And if you haven't heard of that, I encourage you to look it up. There are several books out there, studies, research, all that good stuff. But the idea of psychological reactants is when people feel like their freedom to say or to do something is being taken away from them, they react in a way that tries to restore that freedom. So if you are trying to gain the support or the buy-in, or even better, the commitment and real action from someone who is a stakeholder or a decision maker in your workplace or at your company, the last thing you want is for them to shut down, right? Until that person is no longer, in that position of power to make decisions, you don't really have many other options other than to try to, find common ground with them. So how might you approach someone like this? Before I share with you some of my tips and techniques, if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also hit the like button if you're enjoying this content, and share it with your friends. But let's get into it. I want to walk you through an example. And this is a real world example, and versions of it happen all the time. But let's say that we are working at a really small organization. There's, let's say, 20 to 30 people. And let's say, 3 of those folks identify as transgender. And one of the company's leaders and co-founders has stated in passing that they, quote unquote, don't believe in pronouns. And I'm using air quotes and saying quote unquote because this is the exact language that I've heard people use. And side note, shout out to my trans men and women, boys and girls. As I record this, today is March 31st, 2023. It is International Transgender Day of Visibility. I see you. I support you. Just wanted to plug that. I digress though. But again, in our example, we've got this leader who doesn't want to use pronouns, but everyone on the team has agreed to use pronouns in their introductions, in their email signatures, on Slack, Zoom. And the trans team members have expressed that they appreciate this, right? I say this because not every trans individual is going to want to share their pronouns or have their team members try to do some performative like, hey, let me just help. No, like, all individuals are individuals for a reason. We all have different preferences and approaches. Just because we share identities with others doesn't mean that we all want or appreciate the same things. Again, I digress. So how would we approach the situation with this leader? First and foremost is to start by listening, and practicing active listening skills takes time. So I'm talking to you about this as if this is something you've done before in general, not just as it relates to DEI, but really important is taking the time to hear what the other person is saying, even if you don't agree. This is the most important. One of the fundamental things of psychological safety is we don't need to agree. We just need to agree to disagree respectfully is what I often like to say, right? So the goal here is not to change that person's mind. It's not for them to attempt to change your mind. The goal is to actively listen and understand what the person believes, but not just what they believe, but why they believe it, what's led to that, and to affirm what they're saying as you go, right? So often one of the best skills you can have when you're actively listening is repeating back what the other person is saying to confirm that you're hearing them correctly, right? So in this case of this leader who, again, quote unquote, doesn't believe in pronouns, I would want to ask them questions like, so what do you mean when you say you don't believe in pronouns? What does that mean to you, right? And as they talk, I would ask them follow-up questions, which is, again, a skill that you develop, but some follow-up questions may be, why is it that you believe in that? What experiences have you had? I also like to ask other questions like, what messages do you think this sends to your team? Do you think your team members feel respected by you? Would you feel respected by you if you were in their position, right? So there are, again, endless questions that you can ask. Of course, if you want help, you can drop me a note. That's what I'm here for. The second thing is to be respectful. Like I said before, even if you disagree with someone, it's important to be respectful of their opinion and their thoughts. So we want to avoid any personal attacks, name calling. That's not going to get us anywhere at the end of the day. You may think it in your head. I definitely have moments when I'm like, this person is... But my face doesn't show it and I don't say it because I want to have productive discourse and I want to find common ground so that we actually see change in this space, right? You also have to mind your tone. The wrong tone can cause someone to shut down very quickly. I can't remember the stats, but 90% of communication is nonverbal. So you also have to be mindful of your body language and your expressions as well, because that, again, can trigger someone to shut down. A lot of this is rooted in just psychology and the study of humans, right? And if you sense that person is getting frustrated or annoyed, or you sense that they're going to shut down, back off, right? Consider tabling that conversation for another time. This isn't going to happen overnight. Also be open-minded. So be willing to listen to different points of view, be open to changing your point of view. Remember that the goal, again, is to find common ground and to move forward, not to win any arguments or disagreements. And again, this can be really, really hard to do. One thing that comes to mind for me as I'm talking through this are the many conversations that I've had with white men in positions of leadership who have expressed to me, often in one-on-one conversations, that they have a fear of losing their power in an organization if that organization decides that they want to diversify their leadership board. So it's like this idea, the scarcity mindset, like there's only so many seats at the table. I'm going to lose my seat if we open it up to other people. So just something that comes to mind. But side note, that hasn't been a thing. The diversity of most leadership teams and boards is still almost non-existent. Again, I digress. A few more things here. Be patient, right? Like I said, this isn't going to happen overnight. You having these conversations with people who are resistant to DEI, it takes time. So don't expect to have all of the answers right away, especially if this isn't something that you're used to approaching. Be patient, but also be persistent with your efforts and be intentional with them. The last thing I'll say is be willing to compromise. Sometimes you have to compromise in order to move forward. And if you're willing to just give a little, you may be able to get a lot in return. Now, let's say you're watching this video and you're someone who feels threatened by DEI or is resistant to DEI. You're just like, I don't understand this. I don't know why we're wasting time. It's a waste of resources, or I just don't like it. Take some time, but, and I say this, if you're having those feelings, but maybe there's some inkling in you that's like, maybe I should consider listening to other people, or you have other people that are constantly pushing back on you, and you recognize, especially if you are a leader, that you probably are going to have to compromise at some point. You need to take some time to do some introspective work, right? Reflect on why you are feeling how you are feeling, and be real with yourself, right? What are you threatened by? What are you resisting, and why? You might find it helpful to connect with a DEI coach like myself, who can offer some one-on-one guidance and support. Workshops typically are not the appropriate space for folks who aren't aligned with DEI, because it's really hard to be honest and vulnerable in those spaces, but it's a lot easier if you are one-on-one with someone who can help you really understand and unpack things. And of course, shameless plug, the Inclusive Leadership Journal, which is linked just below in the description, is a great way to jumpstart your journey. It offers a lot of questions and prompts that can help you navigate this. Other things that I would recommend, is, once you understand what's fueling that threat or that resistance, you can find some actionable ways to work towards disrupting it, right? You'll likely find it helpful to find people who share your identity. Again, find people who share your identity, who are actively advocating for DEI or directly and formally involved in DEI work. Follow them on social, have conversations with them, listen to them give talks, whatever it takes. Approach it with an open mind, though. Understand what they're saying, really try to ingest it. And then find people who aren't at all like you. Look for people who don't share identities that you share, and also listen to their perspectives and experiences with an open mind. So that's it for today. It's been another episode of DEI in 5. Let me know what you think about what I've shared today. Let me know what approaches you've taken to having conversations with people that aren't aligned or that simply resist DEI work. Add a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to my channel. I try my best to drop episodes of DEI in 5 every weekday, so check back for more. And of course, if you are looking for support with your DEI efforts, you can drop me a note, and I look forward to seeing y'all back here again soon. Bye, y'all.